It is now 7:30, and so I welcome members to the Finance Policy Administration Committee on Monday, the 4th of January 2021, which is being held remotely from the Council chamber through the medium of Zoom. And we welcome also, of course, viewers of the meeting using notably YouTube, as we together seek to develop an efficient and effective way of working for our community, cross-party at Hertford Town Council and by officers and staff in the year 2021. The Chairman's announcements. Before I come to the question in agenda item 1, I want to make 2 or 3 announcements about procedure. I intend to take item 13 on the agenda, which includes the funding bid, you'll remember, for the Hertford Museum, immediately before we consider the draft budget, which is item 8. And then in a moment, I shall declare a personal interest at agenda item 9 as a member of Hertford Rotary. So I shall ask Councillor Goodeve, as the Vice Chairman of the committee, to conduct the considerations of both agenda item 10 and 9. There's an overlap between business on the 2 items, and I shall mute myself and turn off the video, but I won't go into a waiting room, Nick. I don't think it's necessary, so I'll hear but not be seen and not speak. And towards the end of the meeting, I shall move the agenda item 15, and if it's passed, I'll leave the meeting immediately, being a district councillor linked by interest to item 16, which follows, and whoever chairs the meeting from that point onwards will also close the meeting. And may I say kindly and simply, for good management, in an agenda with a lot of detail this evening, I shall assume that, of course, all members have come prepared with any questions they may have and will have marked their agendas as they intend to raise a point. So therefore, I'll turn the pages fairly quickly, but that's not to stop anyone chipping in, because the chipping in is the very important thing. But I will not, unless the need is really clearly important, go back to pages that I've already turned. So chip in quickly by showing your hand, and Nick and I, between us, will swap that. And agenda item number 1 asks the question, does anyone present intend to record the meeting? And I think that's going to be a no. Agenda item number 2, apologies for absence, Nick.
Received, Chairman.
None received. And then declarations of interest, and my own I've already referred to Rotary and East Herts District Council memberships. Any other members with interests? My screen's a bit limited at the moment. I can see Councillor Sartin, Councillor Newton, Councillor Deering, and I'll go to those 3 first, and then come back to
Councillor Bolton as well.
And Councillor Bolton. Let's have them in that order. Councillor Jane Sartin.
So item 8A on the draft budget, specifically relating to the museum grant as a trustee of Hertford Museum, and I've consulted the town clerk on this earlier to confirm that I can take part in the rest of the discussion on that, but just not the relating to the museum grant. And also for the same reason, the whole of item 13 on the museum grants as a trustee of Hertford Museum, and also have an interest in item 9A specifically on as a member of the Hertford Club.
Thank you. Councillor Newton.
My declaration is being a member of East Herts Council, and agenda item number 16, where we will be discussing human resource events with East Herts Council.
Yeah.
I feel I ought to step out of that one.
Thank you. Councillor Bob Deering.
Thank you, Chairman. Just taking the community grants. Item 9. I used to be, but am not, this council's, as it were, representative to the Hertford and Ware Air Training Corps. But I'm not anymore, so just declare that. And I'm a member of East Herts District Council. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Rosemary Bolton.
Yeah, excuse my voice, Chair. I'm not feeling so good this evening. Item number 9A, the Hertford Club. I'm a member of the Hertford Club. And then item 16, I'm a member of East Herts District Council, and I chair the Human Resources Committee at that level. So I must absent myself from that item.
Thank you. Does any other member, Councillor Pinkham?
You're muted, Rob. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm also a member of the Hertford Club.
Councillor Sally Newton.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm also a member of Hertford Club too.
The quorum throughout this meeting is 3, and so that may become significant at a later point. I think the screen doesn't show any other indications. So agenda item 5, the action sheet, is, we need to actually approve the minutes of the last meeting. I'd forgotten that. So will someone propose that they're accepted as an accurate record? Councillor Deering, seconded by Councillor Sally Newton. Show if you're in favour, please. Thank you. That is a majority. Agenda item 5 is the action sheet, where there's nothing to report. Questions and statements, members of the public, I've been told of none.
That remains the case, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And then the item 7 is paper B on page 7, which is the second quarter income and expenditure account. So we'll turn to that, and I shall begin to turn from page 7 reasonably quickly, and looking up at the screen as I do so, if I can find page 7. Are there any questions on page 7? Page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, page 18, page 19, page 20, and then on to the balance sheets of page 21. Councillor Deering.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I apologise if I've got this completely cock-eyed, but if you look at page 21, the date at the top left is 310320. The date at the top right is 300921. I don't understand how we can cash balance figure for a date that hasn't yet arrived.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's a typo, but can someone?
I think so. We'll wait and see if the town clerk agrees with us.
I certainly hope it's a typo. Moya, that is a typographical error. It should read, because this is a 6-month review, it should read a 6-month review of expenditure. That should read 30th of September 20, yeah? Top right-hand corner of page 20. Thank you.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Just a typo. So page 21, Councillor Porrer.
Oh yeah, just a quick point. I don't know if it's the correct page, but it's on it. On the new homes bonus, we're always waiting for it to stop, I feel, and it hasn't yet. And according to our base budget, we got more than we expected, but it's back down to a base the year after. I just wonder if any of our dual hatted members have any intelligence on how that's going.
Well, Councillor Deering is willing to say, and I will comment as well, and I'm sure others will. Councillor Deering.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Peter.
Sorry.
Well, just Andrew, just to say that based on conversations I'm involved in the county council, everything you've just said is exactly right, which is we're in permanent expectation of new homes bonus being killed off, but it hasn't died yet. So, let's just take it for as long as it comes through.
Thank you.
It is reducing, though, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think actually, I mean, maybe a rider is, and I stand to be,
yeah.
I think relatively, there's quite a relatively big proportion of new homes bonus works its way through to Hertford Town Council. I think there are other areas in the country that organise themselves differently.
Yeah, 25%, and most districts don't actually share with their parish councils that element. They don't have to. It's a choice by East Herts, and I think the nature of our geography means it's particularly valuable in East Herts for our villages. But it is linked also, of course, with very clearly with what developments each of those communities sustains, if I can use the word sustain. That's quite important. Any other questions? And then where did I get to? Page 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, and 40. So back to page 20 for a proposer. Please to say that we note the report. Councillor Goodeve is prepared to propose. Is there a seconder? Councillor Rosemary Bolton. Those in favour of noting? Thank you. Now that's the point at which we now, having dealt with that item, and before we deal with the draft budget item, interject the museum item 8, item 13, and that begins on page 97. And so you have the museum report, and at the end of it is the bid letter, if I can call it that, on page 125, and in the report the financial impact elements, I think we're on page 126. So we clearly need to consider the letter of the curator, but are there any observations and comments to do with the report itself that we've received? Councillor Sally Newton.
Can I commend them on this report? It's quite extensive, and I always like a good photograph. And bearing in mind a few years ago we used to just get the odd paragraph, it's quite extensive. And it's a shame that this year it's been impacted, museum, by the pandemic, but they've done their best to reach out to people in other ways. So I just want to thank them for what is quite an extensive report, a good one too.
Any other observations on the report itself?
I'd like to echo Sally's comments, Peter. I imagine every member does.
Yeah, I mean, me too. It's a well-written report, and you can imagine the heartache in certain elements of it, because so much preparation has gone in, and actually went in with fingers crossed, but knowing there was an anxiety and a concern about delivery. And I think at the town council we felt that same thing, making all the preparations and then knowing while we're doing it that there is uncertainty, and then that confirmation has been coming all too often. So it's it's keeping spirits up of people who are doing a very good thing if we possibly can. Could we look just to see if there's anything that we want to observe about the curator's letter on page 127? And at the very end, the last but one paragraph is the bid, as it were, 140,000 that we're going to consider in the next agenda item. Does anyone want to comment further, or will someone propose that we receive both the report and the bid letter?
I'm happy to propose that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Goody for second. Are we all in favour? Please show. That's certainly a majority. So we can put agenda item 13 on one side and revert to page 41 on the agenda, which is the draft budget. And the purpose of the report, as we're told in 1.1 at the top, is in particular, as it comes towards the end, to ask for any projects that we wish to undertake in the forthcoming year, and they are mentioned, as it were, in each of the sets of paragraphs that follow where relevant. So, page 41, questions? 42.
Chairman.
Councillor Porrow showed. I'll come back to you, Councillor Pinkham, in a moment.
Right.
Yeah, just to pick up on 4.2 and 4.3 on page 42, and it's referred to later in the conclusions. But it seems to be a proposal for security fencing of sorts, which wasn't approved by the relevant committee, yet it's still in there, which I'm sure is very sensible. I'd just like maybe someone could explain why that is.
I can explain as far as the procedure went. I think at the meeting we didn't have enough. I was a member of the Community Services Committee meeting that evening, and we didn't have enough detail really to back it in a clear way. There were questions that couldn't easily be answered, and so the meeting finished with officers undertaking to go back and look again at the information they had, which was fairly limited, and to see whether costs could be improved or whether there was any other scheme. And so it'll come back to Community Services at some point for consideration there. And I think the greater detail will give you as a ward member opportunity to come to an opinion more easily than you would have done on the previous Community Services Committee. Councillor Pinkham showed.
Yeah, I'm not sure precisely which paragraph this falls best under, so I think we can take it as falling as a report as a whole. But essentially, what we've got in front of us is a steady as you go report, one which indicates us carrying the council forward much as it is at the moment. Some new projects here and there, and whatever. which is fine as far as it goes. But we're in the midst of a huge crisis at the moment. And I don't feel that there's anywhere in this report that the town council is addressing what it might need to do to support the town in its emergence from the current difficulties that we're all in throughout the country. Now, it does seem to me that Hertford, perhaps more than other places, depends a lot on a large number of small businesses and voluntary organisations, third sector groupings, all of which are being hit very, very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the town council needs to give some consideration this year, perhaps more than any others, what it can do to support those bodies. Now, I certainly think that reserves could be deployed in support of some of these. We've already talked, the museum is coming up later on and you can see somewhat what the effects on its income have been, but this applies to a large number of other organisations in the town. We should be prepared to support them, even if that were to mean an increase in the precept this year to do so. If we don't do that, we essentially abdicate our responsibilities in relation to the town. Now, I raise this here because I think I don't think anyone should be wanting to make political capital out of any of what's been going on and the tragedy that's taken place in our country and elsewhere in the world. So I raise it here where some sober consideration can be given to it in terms of what we might do. But at the moment, we're not doing enough and we're not doing anything, and we really should be doing something.
Thank you. Yes, I take as the point from my position here. I think that's true. It is, though, a budget aim, and we haven't quite got to the nub at the end, that there will be some latitude, and reserves are not out of the question in the course of that, to do what comes to us as seeming to be very necessary. And I see that Councillor Sartin is going to refer to paragraph 5354 in this report, where indeed there is some initial provision for support for town traders. But I think as time goes on, we will talk about, and it'll become clearer to us what we can do. And I think there's an intention to do that, and there's scope within the broad terms of, as you go budget that I'm putting before you this evening, to actually be adaptable during the course of the time coming out of this epidemic. But Councillor Sartin, do you want to?
Yes, I mean, you picked, I wasn't specifically looking at that, and I just wanted to give Councillor Pinkham general reassurances. That's definitely something that we've borne in mind over the last long 8-9 months now, and obviously we put in place the mechanism to allow grants to be made very quickly to community initiatives that were supporting the community during this time, and I believe that remains in place if it's needed. And obviously we have the community grants, which so far we've always had enough funding in that, but I'm sure that's something that if there was a need if we run out of money, I'm sure that's something that we would all be alive to looking at. And as was referred to, we've put significant amount of resources, both financial, officer and time, into supporting the town centre over this period, which I do think has helped, and as is recognised in the report, that's something we're looking to ensure there's enough resources for in the future. And I'm sure, I think the big issue at the moment is that it's very hard. Nobody knows exactly what the situation is going to be over the coming months, but we can be adaptable to that if the need arises.
Councillor Deering.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'd echo what Councillor Sarson has just said in terms of Hertford Town Council. I think it's also right just to remember where a town, parish council, Hertford or any other town or parish council, fits into the overall matrix of local government. There's been a lot of grant provision made available to local businesses through East Herts District Council, originally funded by central government, of course. The amount of money that central government has injected into the whole coronavirus, the economic side of the coronavirus thing is absolutely massive. And there are, lots of other institutions that have a defined role to play in this and have been doing so.
And Councillor Goody, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. No, I just wanted to refer to the fact that East Herts has set up a town centres forum on which Hertford Town Council and the Hertford Hub and other interested parties are all represented on, so that people can work together cohesively to try to make the right decisions about how to encourage people to at least do click and collect and try to do their bit to support their town centres. But as we all know, it's an ever-changing picture, and it is difficult to make the right decisions. But we've certainly been doing our best to support our town centre businesses.
Well, my feel, as I say, is that there's enough elasticity or latitude for us to pick up, and so we certainly need our attention drawn by the public and member to member where there seems to be some distinct practical thing that this council should be doing at times as times unfold. I mean, we're comparing an unlike year with a standard year all throughout this agenda, really, and so there's so much that's uncertain, and that the latitudes, I hope, will allow us to cope with that, including the use. I'm going to ask Councillor Porrer in a moment about his reserves attitude, including the use of reserves, should that be a matter we need to consider. Can I move on from page 42 to 43? And page 44. And this is where I was actually going to ask Councillor Porrer. You've raised some questions in the past about the size of the reserve. I just wonder whether you would want to comment currently on page 44 on the paragraphs 10.3, 10.4, for example, or are you satisfied with the information you've had so far from the town clerk?
No, I am satisfied. My point last time, and I did promise the town clerk some thoughts which I haven't forwarded yet, but I will.
Yeah.
But my point was where we, I mean, it doesn't matter now because nothing pays anything. But my main thoughts weren't on the size of the reserve; it's what we do with it
Right.
in terms of interest. But that's obviously not quite an issue at the moment.
Okay.
But going forward, there's a separate thing.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. So that's page 44 and 45. We come to the recommendations.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, can I just on the recommendations, as I previously indicated, I can't participate in the item D. I don't quite know how best to do this. As I said, I did contact the town clerk about this earlier.
Well, I think if I take them one at a time, we'll clearly note that you don't take part in
Thank you.
D. So item 1, we are happy, I assume, to note the draft budget. I only see nods. And then B, the committee adopts a balance, and this is where I spoke wrongly about Councillor Porrer's concerns a few moments ago, of 323,634 as a prudent minimum general reserve for the time being. Are people happy? Could I have someone to propose that? Councillor Sartin will, and Councillor Newton will second. Could I have a show of hands, please, if you're happy with? That's the majority. And then C, that we approve the event budget on those particular codes that we've referred to at least obliquely a little earlier. Is anyone prepared to propose C? Councillor Goodeve and a seconder. Councillor Sartin with a different kind of interest in that particular one. Are members happy? A show of hands, please. Thank you. And this is where we note Councillor Sartin takes no action, that the committee approves the continuation of the museum grant funding of 140,423. I'll propose that from the chair, and Councillor Deering is seconding. Those in favour? Thank you, that's granted. And then E is, of course, the crunch one, that the committee recommends to full council a 2% increase to the precept to reflect inflation. And you can see the figure of 1,237,289 and a balanced budget. That's what we're considering to be considered at full town council on the 18th of January. Does anyone want to speak to that?
Well, Chair, I've said what I wanted to say about what I thought we should be doing, so I won't be voting for either a 2% increase in the precept or for a balanced budget.
That's noted, Councillor Pinkham. Will someone propose E? Councillor Deering, seconded Councillor Goodeve. Those in favour, please show. Again, that's a majority. I will ask for those against. 1, 2. And that means there are no abstentions. Thank you very much. That's the end of that particular part of 8. We then go on to 8B, which is on page 47, and we are asked to simply receive these summary sheets, 3 of them. Are we able to do that? The general nods. And then paper E on page 51 is the interim internal audit report, the first of those. And I think I will go through page by page very, very quickly, just in case there are questions for Moy or others on any element here, because we need to understand what we're reading, and some of it, of course, isn't the professionalism of all members. So page 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59. So that is a report that we're asked again to receive. Will someone propose? Councillor Newton, and the seconder, Councillor Deering. Those in favour of receipt, thank you. And then we move on to paper F, which again is to be received. And I don't know whether there are any questions at all on paper F. It's very brief. Can we receive that paper? I think I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. And then it's agenda item 9. And as I said earlier, agenda item 9 and agenda item 10, I'll ask Jen Goodeve to chair, and I'll go into obliteration mode.
Mr. Chairman, should we club members disappear?
Sorry.
Hartford club members, should we go?
Well, that's up to you, I think, to sort out during this meeting, whether, because all interests that are declared are your responsibility, not an officer's or anybody else's. The individual member bears that responsibility.
I'm happy to go, Mr. Chairman. I just want to know whether I go in a waiting room or I just take my video off.
Well, I think probably the waiting room is a bit excessive in this circumstance, isn't it?
Yes, Chairman, this is a public meeting.
Yeah.
I don't intend to speak on the item, but I don't see why I shouldn't listen to hear what other people say on it.
No, I think I agree with you, but I will nevertheless do as I said.
Danny, you can mute both the noise you're making and the noise you're receiving, but still be on the screen. But perhaps someone can wave to you when the Hertford Club item is done.
The only thing that's concerning me is do we have enough non-members here?
Well, how many are we left with, Jan?
Well, I'm not a member.
I'm not a member. Tony and Andrew.
Tony and Andrew are okay, yeah.
So we are core.
So that's core, Nick, yeah.
It's 5 actually.
Well, it's quite a modest request anyway. Does anybody have anything that they would like to raise? Andrew.
I would just say it's a private members club that in a normal non-COVID year makes 50 grand in profit, and it's also a Conservative association, which obviously
it's not a Conservative.
It's affiliated.
It's affiliated.
Yeah. It also says, I noticed in the constitution, it says no member of a radical or socialist organisation may be a member.
Well, we have Councillor Pinkham as a member, so I don't think.
Well, yeah, that's really odd. I don't know why it's saying that.
It's certainly not. It does not seem to be excluding sections of society, anyway.
Perhaps Councillor Pinkham isn't radical enough. Yeah, you see, a lifetime's career just went up his.
But
I think it's a fair point, Andrew. I'm not a member, but my understanding is, without being funny, you know, that you could be a member and not a member, and they're open for membership.
Yeah. But I do want the general point about it's just not being a private members club generally. I don't know how that intersects with us giving it public money, if you see what I mean. Someone could reassure me on that.
Well,
no, Joseph, what would be your advice on that point?
The purpose of the grant is to assist the town and its residents. Whilst it's a membership club, we've heard that there are no sections of the community that are not considered for membership or barred for any other reason. Those are my words. Therefore, I think it can be argued that because it draws from all sections of the community, then it is reasonable to use the funds, if you so decide, to actually protect the what is an old building and part of the sort of historical landscape of Hertford, given the age of the building. If it was private members with particular qualifying requirements, then I think my answer would be different.
I mean, I'm aware that you can be signed in by a member without having, obviously without having to be a member yourself.
I might just keep it moving for what it's worth, Jan and the chair. I'm in favour of this application. I think actually the way that Joseph has just put it exactly encapsulates why I'm in favour. This is quite an important building in the town of Hertford, and I think they do struggle actually to balance their books. My understanding is a completely open membership. I was unaware of the reference to radical interests there, Andrew, but as I say, if Rob can get in, everybody can. No, I'd have no. Yeah, no, it's okay. I meant that kindly, Rob. I'd be very supportive of this person.
It's a broad church, I think, in reality.
But I just really wanted to get a feel that sort of helping to preserve old buildings, regardless of ownership, is something we would look to do with this grant scheme. That's really what I'm trying to ascertain.
Yeah. Okay. I'm happy to propose from the chair. Would I have a seconder, please? Okay. All members? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, can I just ask, just for clarity, that the committee is approving the full £1,200?
We are, yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just run over just to approve it? But can I just, is it worth us pointing out that their constitution conflicts with what he says in his letter?
Sorry, Andrew, didn't quite
Sorry,
hit that.
Is it worth us pointing out in our acceptance that their current constitution conflicts with what he says in his letter about anyone being, because we know, obviously we know people, everyone's allowed, and that's great, but that's not what their rules actually say. Maybe they want to do something about that.
Speaking personally, I'd have no problem if we make that point in our response.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tony.
Yes, I agree, and I think because I'm aware that it's available in wider social circles for events, it is part of the social fabric as well. So in practice, it's used by a wide range of people, and we do need this when we come out of COVID. You know, so,
yeah, I'm certainly aware that they're planning a literary festival in the summer,
yes,
which I think is going to cover 3 days, and they've got some interesting people lined up from what I hear. Okay. Should we get everybody else back and move on to section B?
Yes, yeah, I'd be happy with that personally.
How do we get Councillor Ruffles back in the chair?
He's gone.
He's gone for a glass
I
of
think
bread.
he stepped down to the
Here
hole.
he is.
Yes, I was intending to sit out for the whole batch because of the advice I once had from East Herts Council that if you had an interest in one, you'd be wise to not determine another. I find it difficult advice, so I'm going to take it. And if you don't mind, Councillor Goody.
No, that's fine. I think you're being ultra cautious, but
Yeah, so do I.
Gone.
Okay, so moving on to page 33.
Happy with this.
Does anybody have any thoughts or comments about this application?
Okay with it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm okay, and it's a sensible proportion.
Yes, the same here, only requesting 25%, which I think is reasonable.
Is anybody willing to propose? Councillor Deering, and second, Councillor Bolton. So that's for the full amount, please, Joseph. Okay,
Thank you.
page 41, the Rotary Club of Hertford. Does anyone else need to step out for this one? No. Okay. Any thoughts or comments on this application, please?
Oh, sorry, Jane. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Councillor Startin.
So I was just going to comment that we did discuss the event itself at the Development and Leisure Committee meeting as being part of the programme of events that the Town Council would support. So, and we agreed that we would on the basis of the Rotary taking the lead again on it. So I would support this application, which will make that possible.
Councillor Pora.
Yeah, just to say, again, we've done this before, haven't we? And we've had this discussion that actually the grant they're asking for is actually on something that they make a profit on anyway, but it was explained away for very good reasons at the time that escaped me, but I'll take that on trust that it was made sense a year ago. But just on the maths fidelity point, it's an interesting application. They've included the grant in their own figures, and then when they've done the percentage of the grant aid, they've done it of the income rather than the expenditure. So that what's the total cost is actually 36% of the 3,300 expenditure. It doesn't change it, but it's just wrong.
No, you're right. Perhaps Joseph, you could make that point to them when you go back. So Jane, are you willing to propose this item? And Councillor Bolton to second.
Can I just mention, I know it came up in DNL, but they requested this grant last year, but because the event didn't happen, the funds were either returned or not taken out.
Yeah.
So that was null and void. So I'm in favour of this. Thank you. I'm happy to second.
Thank you. So moving on to D, on page 49, the Hertford and Ware Air Training Corps.
Can I ask?
They've also got a request for new homes bonus grant
Yes.
money as well.
Madam Chairman, it
Yeah.
may be sensible to actually bring that item forward, because
Okay.
if the council, if committee is minded to say no to this grant, it probably should talk about the other one before it says yes or no to either, I would suggest. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sartin.
Can I just ask? I mean, it does seem quite. Were they advised to put in both, or how did this come about? That we've not had this before in terms of sort of the same application, but for two very different sums of money.
The applicant did contact officers and were seeking to maximise the possibility of receiving any funding, and were advised of the two pots of money that is available. They then chose subsequently to put in two applications on the basis that they're seeking to maximise the opportunity of attracting some funding. Whilst they both grant applications are for as described in the reports, obviously committee can choose to grant up to the ceiling of either limit that is being applied for. Thank you.
The only thing that occurred to me is, although this is Hertford and Ware ATC, they are based in Ware, but it appears that they're asking Hertford for all of the money. I'm just somewhat curious to know why they haven't approached Ware Town Council for a contribution.
Is it fair to say that Ware Town Council was broke until very recently? Is that a reasonable understanding?
No.
Their accounts are somewhat more challenged than ours, but personally, I don't see why that Hertford should be stumping up for all of it. I just wondered if either Joseph or Nick had any sort of background on that one, please.
Not specifically if they've approached Ware Town Council, but there's certainly the applications and the summary report on page 66 of the main agenda notes that they are seeking funds from elsewhere for in both applications. So I can't confirm either way whether they've approached Ware, but if they are looking as broadly as they can, then one would expect them to also approach Ware Town Council, given the comments that the chair has just made.
It's always best not to make assumptions, though. Councillor Pinkham.
Just to say something about minibuses. There's a sort of desire for organisations to have their own minibus, stick their logo on the side of it and such like. And I have this sort of fear that they're all over the area. There are rusting minibuses in yards being used once a week, whereas it would make a lot more sense were there to be a central pool of minibuses that all the various organisations could draw upon. It's just a thought. It's not critical to an organisation to have its own minibus.
I think that's a good point. Councillor Deering.
Yeah, if I could just say, as I said at the top of the meeting, I used to be Hertford Town Council's representative member for these cadets. They're on our list of affiliated outside bodies. I've been to 2 or 3 of their committee meetings. They're extraordinarily decent people. I don't know where they've made 2 applications here. My best guess, and nor do I know if they've applied to where, Jan. My best guess is that if they're not, it's because, frankly, in the nicest way, they're probably a bit naive. Rob's point about minibuses is quite interesting. Sort of smacks of the Ukraine somewhere in there, having a fleet of state-owned minibuses, but but I think one of the things that's quite touching about this group is that they definitely do work with young people who don't necessarily come from prosperous backgrounds. I mean, I know from my experience that they sometimes have a struggle to find money to help these young people go on courses and things. So I think they've been trying to get their minibus thing sorted out for a long time.
Councillor Tariga.
Just a point on going from a 20-year-old minibus to a brand new one. And I just think because of depreciation, I would say that if they would moderate their, purchase to buy something 2 or 3 years old, it would make a big difference to their budget. I just think a brand new one is a bit excessive. And I also do agree longer term, Councillor Pinkham does have a point, but we can't solve it today.
Councillor Bolton.
Right. Oh yes, I'm off mute. I note on page 7 with their receipts from last year that they did receive community funding from Ware Town Council and East Herts Council. So they're obviously aware of other funding streams from the local government organisations, and I'm sure they'll be applying to them, or will do if necessary.
Okay, does anybody else have any further comments to make on this application? Councillor Bolton.
I am in favour of supporting them because I think they really are a great organisation, and I have had no connection with them. I know they support a lot of young people. I think it's an awful lot of money. I think I would be in favour personally of granting part of the new homes bonus application, but perhaps not the full amount, and doing that rather than in favour of the other.
Do you have a sum that you would propose?
I haven't. No. Would you like me to make one up? No, I'd rather. I think that it would be more sensible to give them a larger chunk of money than the 1,200 that they request on the other bonus. I think it's too greedy for them to have both. Sorry, they're watching this on YouTube. But I agree with what other people say. I think buying a brand new minibus is instantly, as Councillor Tariga said, instantly depreciates as soon as you drive off the forecourt.
Okay, Joseph, how do you suggest we proceed?
I think we need to, committee needs to consider its answer to the community grant application. It sounds as if there may be some support for a new homes bonus award. I mean, they've applied for 12,000. I mean, committee may be satisfied or comfortable with awarding them half of that, and suggesting they may look to perhaps buy us, if they wish to continue to purchase, to buy a slightly cheaper vehicle for the reasons that have been discussed. So for want of a better figure, perhaps £6,000 is around the area the committee may be happy with.
Councillor Sartin.
Can I put forward 8,000 on the basis that just by buying a second-hand vehicle is not going to halve the cost, I wouldn't think. And they are going to want something that lasts and is reasonably new. So 8,000 feels like maybe a bit more of a compromise figure.
Yes, I'd be happy with that.
Okay.
Yes,
So-
I'm okay with that. Yes.
So who would like to propose? Councillor Sartin proposes going forward on the basis of 8,000 from the New Homes Bonus Fund, seconded by Councillor Newton. So are we going to disregard the community grant application, or are we going to approve that one too? I'm getting shaking heads here. So I think that's the,
Oh, sorry. Sorry, just that you called for a comment. Personally, if the committee is going to sanction 8,000 as a new homes bonus grant, I personally would disregard the community grant.
Okay, that seems to be the consensus. Can I just have a show of hands on that, just to be certain? Okay, is that clear? Okay, Joseph?
Yes, very clear. Thank you.
Right. So moving properly on to agenda item 10, paper H, we now have the Holy Trinity application starting on page 11.
Jan and everybody, I'm really sorry. I should have just reminded all of us that the vicar of this church is this year's mayoral chaplain. So that doesn't give rise to a conflict, but I'm just not going to speak to this item at all.
Okay. Councillor Sartin.
Yeah, I just wanted to query, because this is one that's coming from New Homes Bonus, but is significantly below the level for community grants. Has that been queried at all, or was it just the application that was received? Or am I misreading something?
Joseph, Nick, do you have any comments?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, committee. That is the application that came through. They were given the opportunity to both pots. Both opportunity for both grants, and they submitted it on the New Homes Bonus.
Just to say, you could argue this has more of a legacy literary feel to it, which is why it might fit better.
I'm supportive of it, but I do think, the idea of the New Homes Bonus pot was for sort of bigger projects and things that required more money. So it does seem a little, I do think if further applications came in for under the £1,200, then they ought to be redirected to the community grant process.
They haven't had another application for a community grant within the year, have they? I don't think they have.
I don't recall ever seeing an application from this applicant before, Rosemary.
I think there was for St Leonard's Church, which comes under the same benefit.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, for the toilets. Nick, have you got any comment to make on that suggestion that going forward?
And Chairman, yes, that makes sense. Going forward, we'll for smaller amounts to suggest it goes to the community grants pot.
Okay, but given that we have this before us this evening. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pinkham.
It's just I may be an old traditionalist, but I don't really like the idea of funding the ripping out of a yew tree from a churchyard.
Why?
Why? Because every churchyard should have a yew tree.
Using churchyards.
It's got others. It's not the only one.
Are there other yew trees in that churchyard? I can live with it then.
Okay, so do I have a proposer? Councillor Bolton and a seconder? Councillor Sartin. Okay, so that's granted in the full amount requested. Thank you. So I think we now move on to, we have our chairman back.
In time for the exciting personnel subcommittee minutes, which I'll ask Rosemary Bolton if she has any comment on. They are to be received.
I have no comment unless anyone's got any questions.
I think we can take that we do receive those minutes. Thank you very much. And then we come on to the bulkier thing of the Constitution paper review. But I'm right in saying, Nick, there are no changes that you're recommending as officers.
That's correct.
Yes, yeah. So we'll take those in the way that we've been doing earlier in this meeting, and page by page, and where you have a reason to arrest progress, then please do shout. Anything on page 74, 75, 76? Councillor Porra.
Right, that's on 75.
Yes.
I'll just bring it up under section 5, who decides in 5.1. Says the political party having the greatest overall number of seats on the town council is able to decide policy. I'd like to see how greatest overall number of seats is actually defined, but also, and then also if election is close, no single party might have a majority, in which case the leader is unlikely to be appointed. Is that actually true? I mean, isn't the council the body that decides things, and the political makeup's kind of not relevant? I mean, yes, obviously, if the majority party will de facto make the policy usually, but that doesn't have to be the case.
No, I think we're describing the sort of the end stop here, the ultimatum, and we hope not to actually operate precisely as hard and fast as that is. I mean, there is something that I remember at the end of the last meeting, Councillor Pinkham introduced into the meeting, and we're going to discuss at full town council about just looking again at the wording of one of the standing orders, and that's not unconnected, but I wonder whether the town clerk, because we've got to find words which are appropriate for all occasions, as it were, the ultimate. Are you, town clerk, I assume, happy with the phrasing that we have in front of us to consider this evening on 5.1 in those two paragraphs?
I think so, because I mean it's a descriptor and an explanation really, and the key word in the second paragraph under who decides is the political party having the greatest overall. So that would mean, to me, that suggests an overall majority is able to decide policy. It's an enabling statement that describes process within the council. However, if Councillor Porra and I would like to have a conversation, if he wishes to enlighten me any further, then we can certainly, through yourself, Chairman, look at whether that should be amended and bring it to full town council if that is the conclusion. Yeah. I think as it stands, I think it's fine because it's trying to explain something.
Councillor Pinkham, you've been...
It's just simply to make the point that being the largest party isn't the same as being in a majority, and the Constitution should always reflect that point. I think that goes without saying, really.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have a look at it and see if we can come to anything in time for full council. If not, I mean, it's not actually an urgent thing, but it's something that we all want to agree on. Anything else on page 75? On page 76, Nick, I wondered, but I then questioned myself on 7.6, the final sentence. I wonder whether two words shouldn't be deleted. It reads, these groups have entered into an agreement with the council for it to carry out the day-to-day management of those allotments. Do we mean that, or is the agreement that the individual parties carry out day-to-day management and we do, the big jobs, as it were?
Chairman, yeah, that's right. They do carry out the day-to-day management. What we do, the larger.
So if we cross off the two words for it, i.e. not the council to do that work, but agreement with the council to do it, would that be what we intend to say?
Yep.
It's
Correct,
hard
yeah.
doing this in the committee
Yeah.
when everybody's mind is not round the whole context. So it's one that if we're going to have a talk out of committee before full council,
Mhm.
with the town clerk, if we want to go back and adjust that, obviously we can. Page 76, anything else? 77, 78 is blank. That's the first one. Residents in the council, page 80. I did wonder, Mr. Town Clerk, at the bottom, complaints, the residents, 1.4 this is, the residents have the right to complain to the town council and a complaint should be made to the town clerk. What happens if the resident wants to complain about you, Mr. Town Clerk?
Thank you,
Heaven forbid, but
Councillor Ruffles.
there ought to be a procedure on that.
That was the case. They would be directed to the chairman of the council.
So another thing for our meeting before full council, can we look at the wording that you would suggest?
We can.
And anyone else on page 80, 81? That's the second of those dealt with. The powers and functions, 84. 85. And that's that one. The town clerk and other managers, 88, 89. That's that one done. And then the assets, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96. And Mr. Town Clerk, I think you'll give me the reason, but at the beginning of this particular report, this particular document, 1.5, we talk about the council plate, civic silver and various artifacts. Do we not publish much detail about them here for security reasons, or should there be something referred to specifically in 5.1 above? That's on page 96, for example. Because, I mean, one of the most significant things is the plate that is displayed just occasionally for tourists in the dungeon.
I think it's probably better to keep it minimal in terms of description of quite what these things are and where they're located for the security reasons you mentioned, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And I think I would just add that the regalia and so on is on display from time to time, so it's not being hidden away so nobody can see it. But it's I think it is sensible to just list those objects in the generals.
So what about a bullet point in 5.1 about plate? We've drawings, furniture, manuscripts, porcelain gets a mention, but plate doesn't.
Sure. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Yeah. So that's all of those reviewed. Are we able to accept them? I propose that we do, given that we're going to look at one or two little bits that we might want to revise at full council. Thank you. And then the next agenda item is on page 129, the objectives. And these are only to note. Anything on page 129? I do think on the bottom half of 129, we ought and want as a committee to pay a special officer tribute this year about the Remembrance Parade that is listed, for example, and the way all of the work that went into that, and managed to carry out a thing that was entirely new to the authority, not a thing of, going on and adapting what had happened before so well. And I know the mayor has mentioned this in social media and other things, that it was done with such dignity. And since it was a number one occasion with all of the difficulties that COVID-19 introduced, I thought Hartford Town Council did so well. And perhaps the members would agree with me and ask for officers to be particularly thanked from this committee for that work. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Since you make reference to the Mayor, I would just like formally to say that actually, in general, I think officers of Hartford Town Council done a terrific job supporting the Mayor this year. As everybody knows, it's been a very peculiar year, and there's been a very high level of support. And I should also say there's been a great level of support from fellow members and indeed the community. And I would agree with you that some of the things that we managed to do with the Mayor at the as the sort of the figurehead, I think have been done extremely professionally and have been extremely well done and extremely well received by the residents of Hartford Town, but also more widely in the county. And if you take the remembrance event that we did, or indeed the events that we did, I received compliments about that from wide and far, right across Hertfordshire County. So absolutely, I think officers warrant great congratulation and our thanks for all the work they've done. Thank you.
Perhaps that could be noted and conveyed. Anything on 130, 131, 132, 133, 134, 135, 136. So that means we can note paper K. And now we're near the end of the agenda and we move towards item 16, but before that I shall move the exclusion of press and public. And it is recommended